A warm welcome to everyone to our webinar about proofreading in the European pharma industry, challenges and misconceptions. You all dialed in correctly, and we will start now. This webinar is a shared webinar by Schlafender Hase and CLS Labeling Support EK. First of all, some housekeeping items which I would like to bring to your knowledge. You are all muted automatically. If you have questions, you can address them during the webinar through the Q&A box and type your question into the field, press send, and somebody will reply to you. And of course, we have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. I will address some of these questions so that most of them, I expect, can be answered. The presenters of today, first person is myself. Myself is Dr. Jutta Hohenhurst. I'm a Regional Sales Director at Schlafender Hase GmbH in Frankfurt. And our keynote speaker is Kirsten Ott. She is very much concerned with manuscript creating and proofreading and supporting companies in order to make their artwork being perfect. She's working for CLS Labeling Support. And now I will hand over the presenter rights to Kirsten to take over and go into the content.
Yes, hello everybody. I hope everybody can hear me properly. My name is Kirsten Ott and I am the keynote speaker for this webinar. So I will share my content now so that you can see my presentation here. And now you should see the same slide as you've seen before. So again, hello everybody to this webinar. And first of all, before we start with our topic, I would like to introduce a little bit the company I work for. It's CLS Labeling Support. And CLS Labeling Support is located in Fürth in Bavaria in southern Germany. And I am a member of a team of specialists in all aspects of labeling process. So what we do is we have a focus on the European pharma industry, and we have some areas of expertise for our customers. So first of all, we help our customers in the manuscript creation. This means, for example, translations or the checking of translations, such as reviews, for example, or text changes. But our core business is the proofreading process, so from the manuscript to the final artwork. So what we do is we check or we compare the manuscripts with the PDF files we get from our customers and send them back. And so we do the proofreading stuff for our customers of the European pharma industry. So this was a little introduction of our company, and now I would like to start with this topic for today. So it is the challenges and misconceptions in the proofreading in the European pharma industry. So first of all, what does proofreading mean for pharma? So why is proofreading in the pharma more difficult compared to a normal editorial work like with books or magazines? First of all, in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to ensure the correct implementation of texts and as well as regulatory requirements. So the texts have to be correct, and also some regulatory requirements are important. You have to focus on it. You have to ensure this correct implementation. The second need is to ensure the correct implementation of company-specific requirements, not only regulatory, but of course each company wants to have its own brand, its own design, and this must take place in the proofreading process too. And overall, you have to be sure that there is a GMP compliant documentation, because in the pharma industry, this GMP compliant documentation is very, very important and necessary for your whole process. So we see that the pharmaceutical industry has very industry-specific proofreading needs and is not like a normal editorial work like with books or magazines, or you all know that. So what kind of prevention is the proofreading good for? So good proofreading can prevent errors that lead to first of all the company image loss. Of course, every mistake, every error that is in the text can lead to a company image loss. But it can also lead to expensive corrections after launch. So no company wants to have those expensive corrections after the launch has taken place. And the worst case of course, is a product recall, and nobody wants to have a product recall. And this is why a good proofreading has to take place in the pharmaceutical industry. So the next step is, what if there are findings within the proofreading process? So often there are mistakes which are found within the proofreading process, and what do we have to do in this case? So findings means here, for example, typos or mistranslations within the text, which was already approved by the agency. So I do not mean, or not only mean, deviations between the manuscript and the artwork, but I also mean some findings within the text, which is in the text which was approved by the agency. And of course, the proofreader has to decide what happens with the findings in the artwork. So can I change the artwork? And the proofreader has to decide what happens with the manuscript. So here the communication within the company is very important. But I will talk about this topic later on again. So what we see is that the proofreader becomes like a kind of manager for the deviations and for the findings he has found within the proofreading process. And to avoid the mistakes at the beginning means that the manuscript should contain as few errors as possible. And in this slide, I want to introduce the term manuscript, because what does manuscript mean? When I talk about manuscripts, I mean the files which are sent to the agencies and which then are approved by the agencies. This could be Word files, for example. It could also be RTF files. It depends a little bit on the agency. But to make it easier, I will use the term manuscript in this presentation. So the first step is to make a good proofreading process is to avoid the mistakes at the beginning. And that means to have a few or no mistakes in the manuscript. So first of all, before we talk about avoiding errors in the manuscript, we must have a look what the errors are that can occur. So first of all, one thing which I cannot free you is tight timelines. So everybody knows that tight timelines increase the error rate, and so we all have to deal with tight timelines. But there are some hints where when we follow them, we can make those tight timelines less problematic. I will come to that later on. So which errors can occur in the manuscript? For example, there can be mistranslations and country-specific differences. So one example would here be the number formatting. I can tell you about the German language. In the German language, the numbers have a comma in between. So in the English text, for example, there is the number 1.5%, and in the German text, it must be 1.5%. So when you translate an English text into German, you have to be sure that all the numbers are formatted correctly afterwards. While translating a text, there can always be spelling errors, of course. Here, in this case, for example, arrhythmia becomes to arrhythmia without an H. So spelling errors can occur, of course, via translation, but also by in text changes after translation. Of course, while translating your text, there might be errors with units. For example, when a microliter becomes a milliliter. And this is, of course, a very bad case. The next category of errors that can occur are transmission errors. For example, you have two leaflets with different dosage form, two package leaflets which are almost the same, but they differ only in the parts of the dosage form. So you will write or translate or create the first package leaflet, and afterwards you will transfer it to the second package leaflet where you just change the parts of the dosage forms. And why can there be errors by transferring this text? So first of all, when the editor is interrupted, for example, there is a meeting or a phone call, and the editor is interrupted and forgets something, forgets to transfer something from the first text to the second. The next thing is when there is more than one editor. So the first person starts the transfer, and the second person does the rest, but overlooked something, for example. So here also some mistakes can happen. The next thing which can happen is errors by copy-paste. So when you copy-paste a paragraph or a text, you can, or there is the possibility that you copy-paste the typos or the grammar errors too. And so both of them will, so both text will have those errors, or you copy paste it into the wrong position. And this is also very, very bad. So you have to be concentrated when you do a transmission here. And of course, it can also happen that an implementation of correction was forgotten. So, for example, we have an existing text and some text changes have to be implemented into both package leaflets. Then the corrections were incorporated into the first package leaflet, but they were forgotten to be copy pasted into the second package leaflet. Of course, this is also a very bad error. So, of course, an inconsistent quality control increases the error rate, and what can happen here? So, for example, we can have a bad quality of tables or figures. And if you have a bad quality of the tables and figures in your manuscript, you will automatically get a bad quality of tables and figures in the artwork at the end. So you have to be sure that the quality of tables and figures is a good one. The next thing is that you are not using or misusing track changes mode. So the misuse means that no real track change mode is used, but only a use of red font, for example. So the editor doesn't put on the track changes mode, but it just switches the color of the font from black into red and thinks, well, this is a track change mode. And this can also lead to misunderstandings in the end and to errors in the artwork afterwards. Of course, when you use track changes in the right way, this can lead to missing spaces or indents. So here I will just shortly leave my presentation and I will show you what I mean here. So just leave my presentation here and I will show you what I mean here. For example, this here. So here we have a text paragraph with some changes here, and here some numbers were changed, and everything looks quite okay. But when we switch off the track change modus and have a look at the clean version of our text, then we see that here is a space missing, as well as here is a space missing. And of course, you might say, well, this is not the problem. We have to be aware of very clearly. But there can be something when you misuse the track change mode, or when you don't have a look at the clean version, which I want to show you now on the second page of my document. This is here. So we have the text 3 to 4 times daily. And if you don't have a close look at here and you don't check the clean version, it can happen that in the artwork at the end, there is something like that. And now it's not 3 to 4 times daily, but 34 times daily. And if you have this in your artwork at the end and nobody recognizes it before, then this is really a recall, and this is expensive and leads to a whole thing nobody wants to have in this company, and nobody wants to be responsible for. So the difference between 3 to 4 times daily and 34 times daily is I think very clear. So here you have to be careful with the track change mode. So I will switch to my presentation again and just go on. So the next thing which can happen is that corrections are not incorporated into the current version of the text or of the manuscript. So when you don't know which is the current version and you just take one version you find on your computer and just make the text changes here, then it might be that it's not the current version, and the versions of the manuscripts differ from each other. And this here you should be careful that you use always the current version of the manuscript. The next thing is when you have hyphenations within the manuscript. So we would recommend not to have hyphenations within the manuscript, because this can also lead to misunderstandings and to errors, which then occur also in the artwork. Okay, so now we know which kind of errors can happen. So now we just want to have a strategy for avoiding those mistakes. So how can we avoid mistranslations and country-specific errors, for example? And here we would recommend that the first step is that there should be a review by several persons, so that there is a high chance of eliminating the typos, the errors with units, etc. So all the errors which can occur via mistranslations can be reduced when there is a review by several persons. Of course, here you have to be careful, because when the text is reviewed or was reviewed by more than one person, you might have several review versions which have to be grouped together afterwards. But I will go there later on again, so I will give you a hint how to deal with this. So when you have the first step, the review by several persons, then the second step would be to have a review of the final manuscript, of the final text, as a clean version. And why do we use the clean version? Just to remember, when something we have seen before, like 34 times daily, is there is a high chance to get this when you have a look at the clean version. And the review, which has to take place here, should be done by a person who first doesn't know the text and who second speaks the language well. So a person who doesn't know the text often sees more mistakes and errors compared to persons who have written the text themselves or who have read it several times before. So it's always good to have somebody with a new look at it. So our recommendation is that you have a person to make the review who doesn't know the text. A person who speaks the language very well can focus on special points, for example, on typos or grammar or language-specific points. Like I mentioned before, in Germany, the numbers with a comma or something like that. And so this person is better to get those language specific points. So when you do this review of this person who doesn't know the text and who speaks the language very well, you get a high chance of getting a perfect text with no inconsistencies, because also inconsistencies are not really good to have in the texts. Sometimes you say, well, this is all very good, but in our company, the translations are made by a translation agency. This is very fine, but we would recommend to check afterwards whether the text was adhered to the QRD template, because sometimes the translation agencies don't know that some parts of the text are parts of the QRD template, and then they translate it in the wrong way. So you have to check if all QRD parts in the texts are correct. Okay, so now we have talked about the mistranslations and the country-specific errors. So now I want to go on with the avoiding of the transmission errors. So again, we have this example. We have two package leaflets with different dosage forms. Both texts are very, very similar, and they only differ in the dosage form parts. So our recommendation is to do the translation of the first leaflet and the review of the first leaflet before you do the transmission to the second leaflet. So you should translate and review the first text before you transfer it to the second place. So this would be our recommendation. And afterwards, after this transmission has taken place, we would recommend to compare the manuscripts by using an automated proofreading software. So here, otherwise, so sorry, when you do the translation and the review, then you get the chance not to copy and paste typos and grammar errors into your second text. And if you use an automated proofreading software afterwards, you can get the deviations between the both texts. Of course, you have to be careful because some deviations are wanted and must exist. And you can get, for example, also differences in the style or in the spelling. And also you can you can be sure that everything is transferred on the correct position. So we would recommend to do a comparison with an automated proofreading software at this point, because this is very helpful. In our case, we use at this point TVT, so text verification tool, and also my examples, which I can show you, are all made with TVT. But of course, you can use a different software too. But here, I have to say, I don't really know which kind of features those software have. And so in this presentation here, I will refer to TVT, but maybe it is also true for every other automated proofreading software. So it's not, it's not necessary to have TVT. There is some other software too. And for TVT, I can say that you have to be careful with non-breaking hyphens and non-breaking spaces, because in this case, in the case of non-breaking hyphens, it will be shown only when there are differences between both texts. It will not be shown when there are if there are non-breaking hyphens in the whole text. So here you have to be careful. An automated proofreading software might not help you at this point. And also non-breaking spaces are a little bit difficult, because in our case, TVT only generates a no break warning when there is a line break between in the second text, and if there is a non-breaking space in the first text and a normal space in the second text, and this is in the middle of a line, TVT won't show this. So here I can give you an example. I will leave my presentation again, and I will show you what I mean with this non-breaking spaces. So I have started a TVT project here, and it's about this point here. One tablet, there is a non-breaking space in the Word file, but nothing but a normal space in the PDF file, and here we cannot see any deviations. Only if there is a line break in between in the second in the PDF file, or here in the second text, then we get a deviation because it's a no break warning here. So when you use an automated proofreading software at this point, you have to be careful with some points, because not everything can be seen by an automated proofreading software. So now I will switch to my presentation again, and here I want to show you how to avoid errors caused by several reviewers. So what do I mean? I talked a little bit about this topic before when I mentioned that a review should be done by several persons. But when more than one person does a review, the different review versions must be brought together to one, let me call it master file, where all the findings of all the different reviewers have been corrected. So the first possibility to avoid errors caused by several reviewers is to use shared drive systems. Shared drive systems are very good, because then all people can work with the same document, and in the end there is only one document with all the findings of all the reviewers together. There is only one disadvantage in most cases of the shared drive systems. When one person opens the document, no other person can work on it the same time. So here you have to communicate within your company very good. The next thing is, the next possibility how to avoid those errors is to work with track changes mode and not with comments in the Word file, because when you work in the track changes mode, then an automated proofreading software can be used afterwards to check if no finding was forgotten. So you can check your master file versus the review version of the first reviewer, the review version of the second reviewer, and so on and so on. And you can use this software and you can check if nothing was forgotten, for example. Okay, so afterwards, after focusing on the manuscripts, I now want to go further on, and I want to take a look on the proofreading process. So what are the best practices to avoid errors within the proofreading process? So at what step we are, we have a text which was accepted by the agency, and now we want them to have as a PDF file with all the other requirements I mentioned before, brand and design and something like that. So what are the best practices to avoid errors in the proofreading workflow? So the first step is, of course, a carefully prepared manuscript is the key to an error-free artwork. So when you just take a look at all the points I've mentioned before, this is the first step to get a very good artwork in the end, and to have a less complicated proofreading process for the proofreader. So the next step is to define some standards within your team and with the graphic designers. So of course, those standards can affect the branding. It can affect, for example, line. So is it allowed to have hyphenations of words within the artwork? Is it allowed to have the hyphenation of a product name within the artwork? So you have to define this within your team and with the graphic designers, and you have to check if it's okay for you to have a line break within some units. And here I can give you this example here. So in our case, we have this sentence: it is moderately distributed into body tissues, and the systemic volume of distribution in humans at steady state was 0.58 liters per kilogram. And between liters and kilogram, there is a line break. So you should be sure if this is okay or not, and you have to tell your graphic designer, because then he or she can avoid it if you don't want to have it, for example. And you should tell your graphic designer that he should avoid copying artworks. So, for example, when you have a package leaflet with one strength and he wants to copy it to the second strength, we recommend that the graphic designer should not copy texts from one artwork to another, even if the texts are very similar. The graphic designer always should see, for example, the second strength of a product as a single text and not a duplication of the first strength. If the graphic designer says, well, in this case, it's not possible to do it otherwise, I have to copy it, then we would recommend to check with an automated proofreading software afterwards if something was forgotten, and if some relevant information or if all relevant information is correctly in my texts. So with copying artworks, copying can lead to overlooking necessary changes, and therefore we would recommend to use an automatic proofreading software. So after defining those standards, and after defining the working procedure for the graphic designer, he can start his work. And the next step would be, how does the graphic designer get those text changes? So, for example, we have an existing text. So it's not a new text, it's an existing text, but there are changings within this existing text. So how does the graphic designer gets to know those changes? So how does he know which parts of the text have to be changed? The first possibility is that the graphic designer gets a document with the track changes mode, where all the changes to the former version are tracked via the track changes mode. So it would be a Word file in this case. But here you have to be careful, because it's a common situation that you have several variations, but the first variation is not in track changes anymore. So here the graphic designer cannot, or the changes of the first variation cannot be seen in the track change mode, and the graphic designer might overlook some text changes. And maybe the graphic designer shouldn't change the existing text in this case, but put the whole text into a whole new document. So maybe in this case, a resetting of the text might be useful, because then no changes get lost. Okay, the second possibility, how the graphic designer gets the text changes, is not a Word file. You can also incorporate the corrections or the changes into the existing artwork. So then you take the current PDF file and you add some comments where something has to be changed. And here you have to be sure that no text change was forgotten. And here we would recommend to use an automated proofreading software, because this can help to not to overlook something. So then there is a low risk to forget something. Okay, so now the graphic designer has got the text changes, and he creates a new artwork. And when the graphic designer is ready with his work, we now get the new or the changed artwork, and the real proofreading has to start now. So the next step is the proofreading of our new artwork. First of all, I cannot mention it often enough, a review of the manuscript leads to less questions regarding the evaluation of deviations. So if you have an error, or when you have a review of the manuscript, there is a lower risk to have deviations and errors in the artwork, and there are less misunderstandings regarding the proofreading process. Okay, so then when we do our proofreading, we would recommend to use an automated proofreading software to check, for example, the deviations and the hyphenations, to check maybe images if it's available in your automated proofreading software, and to check the style, such as underlining or bold font or something like that. But the automated proofreading software is not everything you need, because we recommend that that additionally a human proofreader should check some things like typos and grammar. Also, the design cannot be checked by an automated proofreading software, because it also differs from product to product. Also, the line spacing is a point which should be checked by a human proofreader, and also some indents should be checked manually, should be checked visually. So what do I mean with indents? I will again leave my presentation here, and I will show you an example what I mean with indents. So I have a TVT project here again, and we have on the left-hand side our Word file, where we have the some bullet points or some enumerations. And on the second hand, we have the same text. There is also no deviation found here. But as you can see here, there is an indent of the second enumeration. And here you don't know if this is true, if this is correct or not. In this case, I would say it's not correct, but an automated proofreading software is not able to see this, that it's not correct. So this is a point you have to check visually. So what we can see is that the automated proofreading software can do very much and can help you very, very well. But additionally, there are some things you have to check visually. So not only the indents, but also the order of images might be checked visually, because proofreading software cannot do this for you. So an automated proofreading can best find deviations, of course, but the human proofreader also always must carry out a visual inspection. So there is no way to leave this step out when you want to have a good proofreading process. Okay, so the next step is imagine the following situation. So we got our new or changed artwork from the graphic designer, and we finished our proofreading process. And we did a check via an automated proofreading software and also a visual check. So everything is fine. But now find something in our artwork. So I don't mean a deviation between manuscript and artwork. I mean a mistake which is also part of the manuscript. So I give you the following example. The correct sentence would be 35 patients were included in the study. This is the correct sentence, but as in the artwork as well as in the manuscript, there is a not correct sentence here. For example, 34 patients were included in the study. So here we see the S is missing in both texts, manuscript and artwork. Of course, you say this is not a recall. It's not so nice to have, but it's not a recall. But of course, there are cases where you have to, or where you have a potential recall. For example, the next sentence is when 3 patients were included in the study. So here the 4 is missing. So this might be a recall. And so what do we do with this finding in the manuscript and in the artwork? So we have to find out a strategy for the management of findings regarding the manuscript. So how can we manage this? First of all, there must be a decision if the artwork can be corrected or not. This depends on several things. For example, in Europe, in a centralized procedure, it's not always possible or not that easy to correct things. To correct things in the artwork when we see it. But the next decision is what happens to the manuscript. So the manuscript, we don't want to have this error in the manuscript forever, but we want to note it for the future version. So it should be noted for the future in the manuscript. So here you have to decide clearly how and where the change is recorded. And so here there are several possibilities. You can use PDF files, you can use a Word file with track changes or comments. You can print it out, or you can just remember it and use your brain. but you should decide how the change is recorded. And the next thing is decide clearly who is responsible for noting this error. So is it the proofreader, or is it the drug regulatory affairs, so the DRA? You have to check out in your company who is responsible for it. So here, a good communication and a good documentation is very necessary. Okay, so now we've talked about the individual parts of the proofreading process, and now I want to give you some hints about the overall workflow. So how to ensure consistency and quality of our proofreading workflow. First of all, we would recommend to use a good document management system where you have a versioning of the manuscripts and artworks, because then everybody knows which is the current version to work on, and a document management system can help you to administer the different versions and texts. Next thing is a clear definition of responsibilities and process workflows. So here, checklists might help you to define your process workflows and your responsibilities. Then we would recommend, as I said before, a two-step proofreading with an automated proofreading software, the complete audit trail, so that you have a GMP compliant documentation. And of course, also, as I mentioned before, a final visual check and a decision by a human proofreader. So not only with automated proofreading software. Of course, we say that a proper training on all procedures and technology tools for all the people who are involved in this proofreading process is necessary. So everybody should know how to work with those technology tools and how to work on the procedures. So everybody should get a training to that. And of course, when you use an automated proofreading software, which we would recommend, then it should be correctly implemented into your workflow. So here, standards must be defined for each user. And to identify some formal corrections, which are not part of the manuscript yet, but part of the artwork, can also be done by an automated proofreading software when you compare a former version with the current one. Okay, so now my presentation is almost finished, but additionally, I to say some few words about a topic which is more and more discussed in the last time. And this is automation. Automation means that parts or whole workflows work automatically by machines. So the computer generates automatically a leaflet, and afterwards it checks automatically via a software if there are deviations. So no person is needed anymore. So our opinion is that automation can be useful, but only in parts, not on the whole workflow. We think that the evaluation of the deviations must be done by a human proofreader who has the brain and the knowledge and also some experience to do this evaluation. It cannot be done by a machine. And furthermore, of course, we think that a well-functioning automation depends on the quality of the manuscript. So only when the manuscripts are without big mistakes, automation can work properly. And so we see that automatic proofreading software as well as automation cannot replace the human proofreaders, but it can make them better. It can help them, of course. But of course, this is all our opinion. And if you have a different one, it's quite okay. It's just the opinion of our team. So this was the end of my presentation, and now I want to switch to Jutta again. She will talk a little bit about the text verification tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, it's just very brief with regard to the text verification tool, because you have mentioning it as you are using the tool. I assume several of the people in the audience know the text verification tool. It's software that does electronic proofreading very easy. It quickly verifies text, images, and graphics and can compare them from one document to the other. It can compare a Word file against a PDF file. And also other formats like Excel or Illustrator. It works for any language, even those that are a bit Chinese to us. So it can be Korean or Russian, Greek. And the tool was designed for regulated environment. So it is regulatory compliant, and people also can get, as a result, a compliant audit trail. This software can be integrated in automatic in document management systems. So for those who are interested in that, they may contact us through the account manager. But for the time being, I think with regard to the topic, we are done, and I would like to switch to the questions we got, because this was quite interesting. For any of you who have questions, the Q&A is still open, so you can type in your questions. Something I realized during the presentation, Kirsten, you seem to have really detailed knowledge, and people are interested in this presentation. What we did for everyone is we recorded the webinar, and when we have it, maybe the next day, we can distribute it to the people who have been attending. An interesting question actually was with regard to tables. What would you regard, Kirsten, as a good quality of the table?
Okay, here maybe I can give you an example about a bad quality of tables. So then maybe it will be clear what I mean with good quality of the tables. And I can show you an example here I have prepared. So here we have a table, and the first thing which appears is that there are no frame lines. So this is the first thing I would recommend to have in a table, always frame lines, because then it's clear which number belongs to which line. And what we see here too is that the numbers are not all at the same line. So this is very bad, because it might lead to misunderstandings, and maybe somebody doesn't know which number or what the number belongs to. So here I would recommend just to check your tables. Is everything in line? Is everything on that position it should be? And are there no inconsistencies within one table? And then, of course, use frame lines, because this helps you a lot to understand the tables.
Okay. Another question which was raised was with regard to this non-breaking hyphen and non-breaking space. A person would like to know more about that.
Okay, just to explain a non-breaking space. A non-breaking space means that I do not want to have two words to be separated. So they always should appear in one line. You always, or you often take that for numbers with unit, for example. So you want to have, for example, 10 milliliters to have in one line and not a line break in between. So I've put it here, I think. So here there was a non-breaking space in the Word file here between one and tablet. So the editor of the text wanted to have one tablet in one line, and this is why we get here warning, because in the artwork or in the PDF file we have a line break in between, and this comes from the non-breaking space. And a non-breaking hyphen is something very similar. It's just not a space, it's a hyphen. But also here you want to have both parts of the word, which is separated by a hyphen, in one line. So you don't want to have a line break in between. You don't want to have it separated. Does that answer the question?
For me, it was clear. The person who asked it and would like to have more information actually can address us. And I would like to raise just a last question. You may already go to the last slide. Kirsten, you seem to have a lot of experience in proofreading, and you know the tips and tricks. And as you mentioned, proofreading is important and a tedious job to do. Would you recommend to outsource proofreading to experts?
Yes, we would recommend to give this work or this proofreading work to specialists, to experts. Of course, they can be within the company, but they can also be an outsourcing source partner. The most important thing is that you have a good communication between the persons who are responsible for the texts, for example, the drug regulatory affairs people, and the people who do the proofreading. But when you give this work to experts, to specialists, they can focus on this proofreading process, and they can concentrate on the work. And of course, we would recommend it to give it to experts.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kirsten. I think your part was really interesting. For anyone who would like to stay more in contact, we can help you and ensure that your updates are applied accordingly, or with the software to reduce the proofreading time, create consistency in all documents. There are specialists in all aspects of the labeling process, like Kirsten, and also with regard to proofreading, support you from manuscript to the final artwork. Here at the bottom, you find the contact details for us. CLS Labeling is located in Germany, Bavaria, can be contacted through info@cls-support.com. We, Schlafender Hase, are located in Frankfurt and can be contacted through tvt@sh-p.com. We would like to thank you very much for paying attention, the interesting questions, and would like to close for today. We wish every one of you a nice day or a nice afternoon wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.